Alex.
Hi, Natalie.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited.
Thanks so much for having me. I can't wait.
Yeah, we have such a wonderful, thought-provoking, gorgeous program lined up thanks to you. So let's get into it.
Today, we will hear violinist Alex Goldberg present a program of Paganini's Caprice No. 23 and a movement of Schumann's Violin Sonata No. 2 in A minor, played with pianist Po-Wei Ger. The music is coupled with text from Goethe's Faust, which we will hear and analyze first, followed by the music. Enjoy.
So let's get to the text now. You have some Faust to present to us?
Yes, so I wanted to read three excerpts from Faust Part 1 by Goethe, and I'm going to be reading from the David Luke translation.
Great.
So the
Let's hear it.
first excerpt is from the Prologue in Heaven, and it's the three archangels, Raphael, Gabriel, and Michael. The sun proclaims its old devotion in rival song with brother spheres, and still completes in thunderous motion the circuits of its destined years. Angelic powers uncomprehending are strengthened as they gaze their fill. Thy works, unfathomed and unending, retain the first day's splendor still. The glorious earth, with mind appalling swiftness, upon itself rotates, and with the deep night's dreadful falling, its primal radiance alternates. High cliffs stand deep in ocean water. Wide foaming waves flood out and in, and cliffs and seas rush on together, caught in the globe's unceasing spin. And turn by turn the tempests raging, from sea to land, from land to sea, build up in passion, unassuaging, their chain of furious energy. The thunder strikes, its flash is faster, it spreads destruction on its way. But we, thy messengers, O Master, revere thy gently circling day. And each of us, uncomprehending, is strengthened as we gaze our fill. For all thy works, sublime, unending, retain their first day's splendor still. The second excerpt I'm going to read is from the beginning of the first act. Faust is speaking. In me there are two souls, alas, and their division tears my life in two. One loves the world, it clutches her, it binds itself to her, clinging with furious lust. The other longs to soar beyond the dust, into the realm of high ancestral minds. Are there no spirits moving in the air, ruling the region between earth and sky? Come down then to me from your golden mists on high, and to new, many-colored life. Oh, take me there. Give me a magic cloak to carry me away to some far place, some land untold, and I'd not part with it for silk or gold, or a king's crown, so precious it would be. Now I'll read the last excerpt. This is from the Walpurgisnacht scene towards the end of this volume. Faust, Mephistopheles, and the Will-o'-the-Wisp spirit are all singing. World of magic, land of dreams, we have entered you, it seems. Wisp, lead well and show your paces. We must get there, we must hurry, in these wild, wide-open places. Trees in quick succession. See them pass us, see them scurry. Feel the beetling cliff's oppression. Hear those rocks as the winds roar, how their long snouts snort and snore. Through the rocks and through the grasses, streams and streamlets, swift descending. Murmuring water, murmuring voices. Are they singing love's unending sweet complaint from days gone by? How we hope and how we sigh, and an echo like the story of old times still makes reply. Night owl, screech owl, can you hear them? Pie and peewit territory, all awake as we pass near them. Bloated, long-legged salamanders haunt the thicket. All around us, twisting roots that would ensnare us, slither snake-like from the sand, writhing from the rocks to scare us. Trunk knots, tree growths, how they thrive, thick and fleshy, long and live. Each a reaching polyp hand, tangled tentacles to bind us. Mice in many-colored hosts scuttle over moss and moor, and a million fireflies lure us to follow, glittering ghosts, swarming densely to confound us. Are we coming? Are we going? Are we standing? There's no knowing. All is whirling, all is flowing. Rocks and trees with weird grimaces shift their shapes and change their places. Wildfires wander, teeming, growing.
That is so wonderful. Thank you, Alex. All right. I would like to dig a little deeper now into all of the art that we've experienced just now. Why Paganini and why Schumann? How do they relate to each other?
Well, when I was thinking about what I wanted to explore with this short concert program, I wanted to delve kind of deeper into our understanding of the Romantic, a movement that, especially in Germany, had such a unique and special dialogue between uh, poets, scientists, artists, writers, musicians, all really, even if at slightly different times, but working in concert at this kind of shared idea of like of a romantic metaphysic, of a focus on this kind of sublime and on our art's place in the world and humans' place within that. And that drew me very naturally, I think, to Schumann, who for me is kind of really a pioneer of that mature romanticism. And I thought it was interesting to pair him with Paganini, who is someone that I think, particularly for violinists, stands in a kind of category all his own as a virtuosic writer, but whom we tend less often to place into this kind of broader artistic context and recognize not only how he was shaped and how he was, a lot of his career was kind of influenced by this notion of a Faustian bargain and this romantic virtuoso, but also his violinistic writing really inspired many romantic, like or quintessentially romantic composers. One great example is Schubert, who a lot of the kind of technical devices from the Schubert Fantasy for violin and piano or for the B minor rondo are really inspired from his having actually heard Paganini. So I really think that these two composers, Schumann and Paganini, put themselves together really naturally in kind of both philosophical but also genealogical dialogue.
Yeah, it makes me really happy that you're including Paganini in this circle of, romanticism and artistry, because I feel like a lot of people really do see him as almost solely this virtuosic composer. So I really like that you're shedding a new and, beautiful light on this. How does Faust play into this? Why Faust? And why these particular lines? How did you decide on them?
Well, I see Faust both personally, I just have such a strong connection to this work, which I love so much, but I also see it as kind of the most distilled expression of this kind of romantic strain in text that I can really think of. I mean, the Faust legend just has everything. And part of the reason I wanted to pick it, though, was because I think that it actually gets very interestingly at two tensions that are perhaps brought out differently in both Schumann and Paganini. With Paganini, on the one hand, we have this striving for kind of virtuosic perfection that I think is really bound up in how we view his works and his virtuosity in his career as well. And I think that really fits very naturally with Faust, the scholar, the kind of tragedy of Faust, who has read every discipline and yet still recognizes that he is forever blinkered and limited by his materiality, and who strives to go beyond that. And then on the other hand, though, Goethe's great innovation in his Faust, as opposed to the Fausts that came before it, whether in the kind of original chapbooks and legends that came from the church, or even in other very Faustian plays like from Calderon or, of course, Marlowe and Shakespeare. But Goethe inserts the tragedy of Faust, Faust the man, with the Gretchen tragedy and this tragedy of love, which then gets, of course, taken up in far greater detail by most of the musical adaptations directly of Faust, like Gounod, for example. Um, but I think that these two strains here, the human tragedy of Faust, the lover, and his relationship with Gretchen, to me is very pregnant in this comparison with Schumann and his, of course, fraught and certainly very discussed relationship with Clara. So, of course, Faust is just such an epic work that I had to think a lot about which parts of it to share to kind of bring out all of these threads. So I started from this prologue in heaven because I think that it really gets at this description of the sublime in really beautiful terms, of this looking on, uncomprehending at this constant turmoil and turbulence of the world. This idea that the world isn't this finely ordered clock or machine, but instead is this always swirling, always moving, ununderstandable substance. And I find this in Schumann's writing actually very, very directly, because almost the whole time the piano has these roiling, running 16th notes, often in very similar ranges to the violin. And both as a performer kind of trying to find space within this beautiful mass of sound, and I think also as a listener, feeling this constant, uneasy, passionate device swirling around underneath the lines, really brings across to me that sensation that I think the angels are alluding to when they describe looking at God's creation of the world. The second excerpt, I think, is more clear. It's a really just concise statement of what I was describing with Paganini and this idea of sort of virtuosity, or understood as a romantic striving, as a desire to get beyond our material limitations to a kind of perfect ideal of the music. And I think that's really what Faust is talking about, this wanting to soar beyond the dust into this high ancestral realm of ideas that he really poignantly before this describes in this that Goethe describes in God describing man as like a grasshopper that is able to jump up above this kind of limitation of dust, but still always falls down. And this kind of essential tragic striving as something that is really inherent in this view of romantic virtuosity, particularly. Finally, the third excerpt from the Walpurgisnacht, I thought was a really just fun and kind of perversely joyful description of how I hear the middle minore section of the Paganini that I played. It's this kind of darker place because it's in C minor as opposed to E flat major, but everything's scurrying around all over the violin's range with these huge leaps and really funny little timings and repetitions. And it reminds me of, Will o' the Wisp leading Mephistopheles and Faust through this kind of perverse ceremony, and this kind of sense of like Goethe almost alluding to this idea of night music, of these little glitterings and squeaks and just sounds of the natural world that we hear in darkness, that we don't see where they're coming from, and we just experience them as this kind of excitement tinged with maybe even a little bit of fear and nervousness.
And now for the music.
Thank you so much, Alex. It was such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. It was so wonderful to be able to share these works that mean so much to me.
Of course.
Thank you for joining us. Next week, Friday the 28th, we have Anthony Ratanov on the piano. See you then.